Hello, my name is Clive and I'm a director at Peak Accountancy Training. We provide online courses that you can use to study towards the AAT exams at levels 2, 3 and 4. If you are interested in our courses, please do find out more by visiting our website www.peakaccountancytraining.co.uk. Well, in this recording, I'm going to be walking you through task 5 of sample or practice assessment 2 of the AAT assessment for principles of costing. And task 5 is focused on the production of what we call a manufacturing account. So there's two elements to the task, parts A and B, and it's worth in total 12 marks. Now, in the first part of the task, we are asked to complete the calculation of direct costs of production or manufacturing by selecting the appropriate description for the values that are already shown in the table. The total direct cost of production are £175,000. So let's just remember what sort of costs make up the direct costs of production or manufacturing. We'll be looking for the direct cost of materials, the direct cost of labour, and potentially there may be some other direct expenses. Don't be surprised if you can't find any direct expenses in the question information though, because they're not always given to you, in which case you're just looking for direct materials and direct labour. So let's have a look at the drop downs to see what descriptions potentially could match against these numbers. So just clicking on the first drop down there, we can see our choices are the purchases of raw materials, closing inventory of raw material, opening inventory of raw material, and direct labour. So there is no mention of any other direct expenses. So to find out the value of our direct raw materials, we need to basically do a calculation that takes account of the opening inventory value of raw material plus the cost of all the purchases of raw material, and then we deduct the value of any closing inventory of raw material. That calculation will tell us the direct cost of raw material that has been issued to the manufacturing process in the period. So that's a sub-calculation that you need to remember to go into the exam. So looking at our table of numbers here, the £75,000 will relate to the opening inventory value of raw material. That £75,000 worth of material is available for us to use in the manufacturing process in the period. Now we add to that the £106,000, which relates to the purchases of raw material across the period. So we're now basically looking at this and thinking we had £181,000 worth of raw material that we could have issued to the manufacturing process in the period. But did we issue all £181,000? Well, if we have any inventory of raw material left in our stores at the end of the period, clearly we didn't. So what we need to do is deduct the value of any closing inventory of raw material from our £181,000, and that must give us the figure, the cost of materials that were issued to the manufacturing process, the production process in the period. So that negative 31,000 is going to relate to the closing inventory value of raw material. So basically £75,000 plus £106,000 minus £31,000 tells me that £150,000 worth of material were issued and used in the manufacturing process in the period. Now that material would have been converted into product or into partially completed product in the period by the use of direct labour. So the £25,000 is my direct labour cost, which adds to the £150,000 worth of material to give the £175,000 worth of direct costs. So let's have a look at the next part of the question. We're given some more information about our production or manufacturing process during the period. We have manufacturing overheads of 25,000 and then information about two different types of inventory. Work in progress, which is partially completed product, and finished goods. What we've got to do is use that information and indeed information from the first part, the first requirement of this task, to complete the table below. And the table below is in a spreadsheet format. You will find in your Principles of Costing exam that there are some spreadsheet skills, some basic spreadsheet skills tested through the use of embedded spreadsheets in some of the assessment tasks. And they're basically testing simple things like the use of simple formulas and some simple formatting. They're not full-blown versions of Excel, but if you use Excel on a regular basis, then the menu options should be relatively familiar to you. So what we're asked to do is to calculate the costs in the table below, showing answers to the nearest whole pound. Specifically, we're told not to use formulas when entering our answers. So we do the calculation and pop the number into the cell. Then we've got some formatting to do. Let's focus on the numbers first. Now we can make use of the pop-up window away to the right in the references section to save having to scroll up and down. So I'm just going to open that references section and just pull up the information for part B of the task. So the first thing I'm asked to put into cell B2 basically is the cost of direct materials used by production. Now that's the figure that we calculated in the first part of the question. It's the result of adding the purchases of raw material to the opening inventory value of raw material and then deducting the closing inventory value of raw material. So that was £150,000. So I'm just going to pop that figure in. The direct cost figure has been pre-populated for us, £175,000. Now what I'm asked to calculate next and input into cell B4 is the manufacturing cost. Now it is important going into the exam to know the order that the manufacturing report builds up in, and it's important to know the different subtotals and how to calculate them. So what do we need to do to find the manufacturing cost? In other words, the cost of all production that has happened in the period. Well, we know that the direct cost is £175,000. What we need to add to that figure is the production overhead for the period, the manufacturing overheads for the period, which are given as £25,000. So we add the £25,000 to the direct cost to give us £200,000, which is the total cost of manufacturing or production for the period. But that manufacturing cost relates to products that we may have just finished off in this current period and were started in a previous period. It relates to products that we've started and finished in the period, and it relates to products which we've started work on but are still in the factory, in the production process at the end of the current reporting period. So to find the cost of goods manufactured, in other words, the cost associated with all the goods, all the products that have been completed in the period and issued from the factory to the warehouse waiting to be sold, we need to bring in our opening and closing inventory values for work in progress. So the calculation for cost of goods manufactured is to take our opening value of work in progress, which is 60,500, add to it the manufacturing costs for the period, 200,000, and deduct the closing inventory value of work in progress, which we're given as 69,750. That means that the cost of all goods that have been finished in the period and have left the production process and gone into the warehouse waiting to be sold is £190,750. So finally, we're asked to calculate the cost of goods sold. Again, it's the final subtotal on a manufacturing account. You need to remember going into the exam how you calculate that figure. The £190,750 worth of goods that have been manufactured, in other words, completely finished in the period, would have gone into the warehouse as finished goods waiting to be sold. They would have joined any existing finished goods, so all of that amount of product is available to be sold. But if we then deduct the value for the goods that are left in the warehouse at the end of the period, the closing inventory value of finished goods, that must give us the figure for the cost of goods sold. So basically, I take my opening inventory value of finished goods, 59,250. I add £190,750, which is the cost of all the finished goods that joined the warehouse in the period, and I deduct the closing inventory of finished goods, 63,000. I get the cost of everything that must have been sold, £187,000. That can be deducted from the revenue generated from the sales to arrive at my profit for the period. So there's the calculations. Obviously, it's important for you to remember the order that items appear in the manufacturing account and also how you calculate all the various subtotals. So let me just close down that reference information, because to finish off this task, I'm going to have to go for those spreadsheet skills points. I've got my numbers in there. I now need to do some formatting. So I'm asked to place a border around the table with a certain line thickness, but not round the whole table, just cells A1 to B1. So if I just highlight that particular range, and then I need to look on the menu option that's been provided for the formatting to put borders around cells. And if you're familiar with Excel, you can see those borders on the right hand side of the menu. I want a complete border. There's a little drop down which should give me the line thicknesses, and I'll select the appropriate one that I need to use. I then want to format cells B4 to B6 with thousands separators. So again, if I just highlight B4 to B6, and then I need to find the number formatting. So again, from the menu, there's a format, number format. If you hover over the menu items, it gives you a little pop-up that gives you a bit more detail on what that particular menu option does. I'm going to select the drop down, and one of the options is to put the 1000 separators in. So there we go. I'm asked next to fill cell B6 with any color I like, so I'm going to select that particular cell, look on the menu for the color fill option. So again, just hover over, make sure I pick up the right one, because you've got font color and you've got fill color next to each other there. So just click on fill color, any color I want. I'm just going to pick a blue color, and then finally increase the text size of cell A1 to font size 20. So just click on A1 and go and find my font sizes way to the left hand side of the menu, click the drop down and select the font size of 20. So there we are, some very basic spreadsheet skills, but essentially the task, the numbers in the task, focused on a manufacturing account, which is quite a niche little area of the syllabus. And the manufacturing account just presents our costs through the production process and enables us at the bottom to show our cost of sales.